Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This week I have such a fun video. On my channel I do a few types of these videos. I've done reading romances for a week, reading thrillers. There's a few other ones that I'm kind of forgetting right now, but on all of those videos I get comments, like a lot of comments, saying to read fantasy for a week. So I'm kind of in the mood for a fantasy book right now, so I think now is the perfect time to start this. I am going to be reading, as I just said, fantasy books for the week. Now I am not a huge fantasy reader. I have dipped my toes into the genre. The thing with me and fantasy is that fantasy books are more times than not part of a series, and those series also are pretty big, and I just can't commit to a series that well. You know, once I start a series I either have to finish it or I'll take a break and never go back. I have a bunch on my TBR, my physical TBR, so I've chosen a few that I really want to get to. I think for me with fantasy, it's one, hard to get into because it's a lot of descriptive stuff. It's like made up stuff, so it's like hard for my head to one, picture it, understand it. I don't know why it takes more brain power for me. It definitely is entertaining, but when it gets too descriptive I get really bored, and there's like a chance for me to not want to finish it. There's a chance for me to get into a slump this week. So yeah, I don't love getting into a fantasy book, but I do love being in the world of the fantasy. I also am more of a fantasy romance reader, but it's okay if some of the books I read are heavier on like the fantasy and the world and not romance. But if there's a subplot of romance, then I'm happy. But the first book I've decided to read this week is Kingdom of the Feared by Carrie Maniscalco. This is part of the Kingdom of the Wicked series. It's a trilogy, and this is third and last one in it. I'm trying to finish a bunch of series or trilogies, anything that I've started last year or at the beginning of this year, and try to finish them this year. And this is one of them. I have a few fantasy ones that I really want to finish, maybe in this video. So this is the first one. If you haven't heard of Kingdom of the Wicked, basically the first one is about these twins, Amelia and Victoria. They are witches, and Victoria ends up dead. She is murdered, so Amelia is going on this kind of manhunt trying to figure out what happened to her sister, who killed her. And during one of her spells she kind of summons one of the princes of the seven sins in hell. So the one she summons is Wrath, and now he is also on the journey with her trying to figure out what happened. And then you get like kind of an enemies thing going on with them, but there's also like a tension and like a little bit of a romance happening. I love Wrath so much. That's basically the essence of the first one. You kind of go on the journey with them. I'm not going to say too much of what the second and the third are about because it's spoilers. This video is going to be spoiler free. I am going to read this, give you my updates, and honestly I think so far this trilogy is definitely worth it if you like romance, fantasy. The mystery elements in this is really fun too. You're trying to figure out what's going on. It is a little confusing at points, but like not too much. That's a thumbs up. I just started this morning, so I'm gonna get into this now. I'm very excited. That is all for me. Let's get into this one. Hi guys. You may be getting deja vu because I'm in the same spot, in the same sweatshirt, but I'm just in the same sweatshirt. It's a new day. It's the next morning. I'm so happy that I started this because, as I said, I was in a slump, and I read almost halfway through the book. I read about 174 pages up till this morning, or like 10 minutes this morning, so the majority of that was from yesterday, and that makes me so happy because I've read like maybe 100 pages in the past week. Like that's it. And that's like not a lot for me. Like I'll be reading all the time, and I haven't been reading. I haven't been wanting to pick up a book, but this has been so entertaining. And I got like this one the best out of the whole trilogy so far, and I think it's because, you know, when you get to like the end of a series or a trilogy, you know all the characters, you know majority of what's going on. It's like you can really enjoy it now, and I think that's what's happening. The first two, I got like a little confused with a few of the things that happened in it, but they were still good. But this one so far is my favorite, I will say that, and there's still some things that you're learning and still some things that come up, and when that does happen I always like question myself, and I'm like, am I supposed to know this? Am I supposed to know the answer to this? But you always find out pages later. Everything clicks and makes sense, and it's just so far so good. I will say the main character, Amelia, I don't want to say annoyed me the first two, but she had this like character trait and just like these things about her that I was just like always like, why? Another one that makes sense now. I love when things click in series and books. It like scratches a part of my brain. I don't know what it is, but things are clicking and it's making me so happy. I am so down bad for Wrath. Like he is one of my favorite. He might be my favorite other than Kaz from Six of Crows fantasy. Do I call him a man or do I call him a sin? What do I call him? A prince? He might be one of my favorites. He is I love him. I eat up any scene that he's in. I don't remember loving him this much in the first two, but also I've read those in December, so I don't know, I don't really remember. I do remember enjoying Wrath, but like this is like next level. Love him. And I also love how in this one you get, in the second one, but like you get his brothers more, and he is one of the sins of hell. There's 7 of them, so you get his 6 other brothers, and when they're all in the same room where they're all talking together, like it's the banter between them, I guess, and like they're kind of joking sometimes, and it's actually funny. Like it makes me giggle, and I like that. I'm also annotating this, which makes me happy. And this book reminds me of like a mix between the Vampire Diaries, one part of it, actually 2 parts of Vampire Diaries, and ACOTAR. I don't know, Amelia and Wrath, and usually a lot of like fantasy characters give me ACOTAR, like Reese and Feyre energy. I don't know what it is, but this is definitely, there's like some parts and I was like, are we in the right book? But yeah, so far so good. Lots of things are happening, not just one, but one main thing is happening, and it's very fun to go along. I am excited to see where this goes. I'm fingers crossed gonna just binge it today. It's like my goal for the day. Thumbs up. See you when I have further updates, further opinions. Hi guys. Okay, I finished Kingdom of the Wicked last night. I'm actually very happy because I said I was gonna binge it that day, and usually I say that just to say it, like it never actually happens, but I finished it. I didn't give a lot of updates while I was reading because I feel like it was hard to give my opinion on things when this is the last in the trilogy, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read it. I ended up giving it, I've actually never rated anything this specific, but I rated it 4.25 stars. I loved it like a lot. One thing I wish was that it was dual point of view. Like if I could get Wrath's point of view, I probably would have given it 5 stars. I'm obsessed with him. But I really enjoyed this one because it kind of gave answers to like so many questions from the first 2, and like I said, the second one wasn't my favorite, but it kind of made up for me not loving the second one. The end of it, the way it wrapped up was so good, and I actually annotated it, and I didn't annotate the first 2. It's just this one I felt compelled to. I will say this one was kind of, you feel like it gets slow, but then something happens, and then it gets like a little slow again, but then you know something's gonna happen, and it's just like things just keep coming to light. I will say also Wrath's brothers, I love them. I know in the first few some of them are an enemy in a way. They're still like the princes of hell or whatever, the sins, and they're not good people, but you know what, I love when they're in a scene, they're like kind of funny. And Wrath's banter with Amelia is so good. I'm obsessed with Wrath. I think he's my top fantasy male main character other than Kaz from Six of Crows, but he might be my top. I love him. But yeah, that was our first fantasy. I wish there was another one. I think another one's coming out about one of the brothers' envy. I'm excited about that. I want a book on all of the brothers. And there's a house in here, House Sloth. One of the other princes, Lust, was talking about Prince Sloth, and it says all he does is lounge about with his books. His house is one giant messy library. But I was like, I'm probably House Sloth too. You know, I would like to lounge in his library too. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I'm really happy that I read or ended up reading the last one. I always do this. I always end up like stopping mid-series and then ending up loving it. I feel like it's also hard for a series where a trilogy or longer to get better as it goes on, but I feel like this one, the last one at least, was like the best out of all 3, so I loved it. Okay, our next read is, I actually don't know if it's Anastasia. I think it's Anastasia because when I read Icebreaker it was Stassi, so it's like Anastasia. I think this is Anastasia because it's based off of something. I don't know, I have to look into it. But this is by Sophie Lark. This is my first book by her, so I'm very excited to see how her writing is. Wait, you can't even tell. Literally like 15 pages in. I didn't read the back of it. I did go in blind, so I don't know if that's good to do in a fantasy because it gets confusing, at least for me, most fantasies. But I really wanted some romance in my life. This seems like the great mix because this is a fantasy romance, because usually fantasies have like subplots of romance, but I want like a heavy romance, so hoping this is what this gives me. Every time I read the back of a fantasy, I have no idea what they're talking about, but we'll find out, and I'll update you guys as it goes, obviously, but I'll update you guys on what it's about because I don't really know yet. But I'm excited. She's thick. I think it's like 600 pages, so I don't know how long this is gonna take me, but this is our next read. I'm excited. Let's get into it. Sitting here just kind of binging it. I don't know Why? Well, I'll get into that in a minute. First, I found a really good playlist for it. I think my favorite book playlists ever are fantasy playlists, and I don't know what it is. It's just fantasy music with a fantasy book. It's just like, it makes the story so much better. But listen to this one. It says POV year Anastasia Romanov. Really good. I mean, it's not long. I went through the whole playlist and now I'm on like random shuffle, but what was in it was really good. I got to page 120. The chapters are long and the font is really small, so that's something to take into account. It bothered me at first, but as I kept reading it, I've gotten used to it. Always in the beginning, it bothers me a little. I also, while reading, it kind of illustrates some things that are going on within the book. For example, I read on my Kindle this morning, and on my Kindle, all of these graphics are colored, but obviously black and white in the book, but it's just like little graphics. And at first, they felt really random when I was confused. Not confused, I mean, I knew what they were of, but they felt random. But now, when they pop up, it kind of like helps visualize the story, which is really nice. I really like the graphics. I think that's fun. I've never read a book that like did that, especially in a fantasy. It's hard for me to picture literally anything, so I really like that there's graphics. Now, at first I was like, I don't know if I like this, but now it's really fun. Still a little bit confused of where the story's gonna go, being that there's so much left. There's so much that could happen. It starts with when she is 11 years old, Anastasia, and it's kind of talking about how all of her siblings have these powers, and there's this one day at a certain age you have to show off your powers, but Anastasia, being 11, still didn't get any. Her younger brother was sent off to meet up with her dad, and she hopped on the train and didn't tell anyone, and so she went with them. And while she was there, she met, on the enemy side, his son is the same age, around the same age as Anastasia, and she found that she had some kind of power, but she can't really get to it again. I don't really know. She had some power, she figured it out there, she met him, and the enemy signed a treaty with her dad. Part of the treaty was that Damien, the kid, had to come back and train. I'm not sure. But now she is 13, and that's really as far as we've gotten. She has talked to Damien again. We did find something out about Damien, which was pretty interesting. So far, that's it. They're very young. I will say, being 11 and now 13, they talk like they're like 18 years old. I know for a fact I didn't know half the words they were saying when I was 11, but that's okay. It's fantasy. It's fiction and it's fantasy, and I'm taking it with a grain of salt. It's really long, so I wasn't expecting to get a crazy story right off the bat. You know, you need the backstory, you need the world, you need the characters, but I feel like most of that, or majority of that, is out of the way, and now I feel like we'll get more into the story now. At least I hope so. But I'm hoping eventually she'll be older, because it did skip from 11 to 13, so I'm hoping she's gonna be older soon. But yeah, I think I'm gonna switch over to my Kindle now. It's so much easier to read on there, but on my Kindle it says it's like over 800 pages when the book is like 650, so that's intimidating. And we will see how this goes. I will come back with more updates. Anastasia. Honestly, why do I keep saying Anastasia? Anastasia update. I got to page yesterday today. I'm on 216. The font is really small, like I said, pretty thick, but I am proud of myself for getting this far. I think I like low-key, what's the saying? Shot myself in the foot. Going into this thinking it was heavy romance. Don't do that. If you want to read this book, don't expect romance. At least from where I am right now, up to page 216. It's not. It's very much fantasy, world building, lots of characters, heavy politics. It was my personal problem that I went into it thinking it was heavy romance, but once I like realized it wasn't, my mindset changed. I was like, okay, if I'm not gonna get romance, let me enjoy the fantasy. It's heavy on the detail and the descriptions where I don't think it has to be. It's also told in a timeline where Anastasia is 11 at first, and then 100 pages later she's 13, pages later she's 16, where I'm at she is still 16. And I feel like in some fantasies, or most, it'll go like right into the story, and then when the main character wants to talk about when she was 11, it'll give a flashback and be like, this is what happened when I was 11. Or it would do different timelines, like her present, and then next timeline, next chapter is past. But this is like timeline like chronologically, like she's 11, she's 13, she's 16, and I feel like that's getting a little, I don't know, I'm just like, I don't know where the story's like going. She's trying to work on like her magic and a lot of politics about the country and her father. We got Damien's point of view, so that was nice, but it's just like, I feel like a lot is being said, but nothing's happening yet, and it hurts because we're 200 pages in. Like, I feel like it didn't have to be this long to get to where we are right now, because I feel like nothing has really happened. I know too much knowledge about the book that I feel like I don't need to know. With that being said, I'm hoping today's reading, it picks up, because I really just want to get to the depth of it. It is floppy though, give it that. I want to get over halfway today. I want to binge the book today. That is my goal. It just has to pick up for me to do that, or else I'm just gonna get so bored. And I don't want to DNF a book in this video. If it doesn't change paces, I don't know how much longer I could read about it. I heard that the romance comes 400 pages in. So I'll be here until then. I keep reading because I need to get further in. Much later. It's now 5:30. I've finally made it to part 5 of the book, which is page 421. Listen, I'm over halfway obviously, but I had probably the urge over maybe 20 times to DNF this. It started picking up at page 400, if you can imagine. The whole first half was just politics. It felt like a history lesson. I literally felt like I was assigned this book by like a history class. Like, I felt like there was no reason for what was being told to us to even be said. Like, I feel like we could have gone to the huge plot of the story that's going on right now 300 pages ago, and then just like the little history politics been like thrown in. Like, there's so much detail. It takes like 3 pages to describe something, and it's just like, I don't know. And I know some people like that. Some people like the politics in fantasy and like the history feel of it. Sometimes, I don't know. And I know that this takes place in like the 1900s. Like, obviously I understand that, but it's just the amount of detail that is portrayed. I'm not gonna lie, I skimmed about when the war was brought up and what they were doing, and the main guy, Damien, the love interest, that the love romance didn't even start until 400 pages in, wasn't even in half the book so far. Like, he was sent off. Like, he was barely in it, and I was just like, I don't know. I got too far into DNF it as I started it. I committed myself. I'm not DNFing it. So far, it hasn't even been worth it. Like, something's happening right now that is just so out of pocket. And I'm just like, where did this come from? And I don't know if it's because I don't know like the original story of Anastasia. Like, maybe that's where I'm going wrong, but like, I feel like you shouldn't need to know that to go into a story like this. I don't know if it's me. I might be the problem. I just feel like the back of it's very deceiving because it makes it seem like her and Damien are like the whole plot of the book, but no, you get like 100 different characters, you get 100 different plots, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just not giving what I thought it would. I mean, since it's picking up, I'm like, okay, I can finish it now. I'm gonna go read more. That's just my update. I started out this book hopeful. The first 100 pages I was pretty hopeful, and then flat for the other over 300 pages that I read. We'll see how the rest of it goes. Can't even imagine where it goes from what I just read. That's all I have. Fingers crossed though that it looks up from here. I just want to end the book on a good note at least. Hi guys, it's the next morning. I think it's time to talk about Anastasia. I finished it last night, but I'm not kidding. The whole day I was reading. I finished at like 10 p.m. last night, and I closed the book and I had the biggest headache ever. Like, I needed to like de-stress from what I was reading. I took the longest shower. Whatever. It wasn't fun. I gave it 2 stars. I think going into it, I had a lot of hope because I don't know why I assumed it was... Actually, I know why I assumed, because this is kind of marketed as an enemies to lovers and as a dark fantasy type of book, but that's not really what you get, and I feel like that's low-key false advertising for the book, because going in expecting this like intense romance and everything, you don't get that until the last like 200 pages maybe. At that point, it comes out of nowhere because you read the first 400 of whatever it was, and it's like, I feel like the second half of the book should have just been the book. And I know that she was trying to incorporate like the politics of it and really like bring light to that with the story, but I went into it not really knowing the retelling of this. I didn't go into this wanting a retelling. I just wanted the fantasy and the enemies to lovers, so that's how I went into it. I think that it should be prefaced beforehand that this is a lot of politics of the country and war talk and not much romance or intense like adventurous things until the end of it. Like, nothing crazy happens until the end of it. So going through the first 400 pages, it's I don't know what word to use. It's painful. That was just my perception of it. And the only thing is, I would only recommend this if you like the politics of fantasy and that's like your favorite thing about it. You would love this. But I get bored so easy in fantasy that this was just like dragging on for me, and it was so descriptive. It took like more than it should to describe something. The author might have gotten really immersed in telling the story and she was really into it, but like reading it as a reader and not really like knowing what was gonna happen, it wasn't fun to read. Even the end, it was like things after things happening, and I was like, where is this coming coming from? Like, what are these plot lines that are like not really connecting for me? And then, like I said, the first half you don't really get that romance. You get them meeting when they're younger, but he's kind of sent off majority of the book, and then he comes back at the end and it's like romance, and you're like, what's going on? And there's so many characters, and it's just, I don't think it was for me. My expectations were completely different of what I got out of the book, and it wasn't worth it for me. The cover is beautiful, but the story just wasn't for me, and it personally just felt like a waste of my time reading this. I ended up skimming majority of it because I was just like, I don't know. And also right after Kingdom of the Fear that I like loved so much, it was just like I was hoping for more from this, so I don't know. I think I'm gonna do Serpent and Dove. This is another witch story, so I'm kind of nervous that it's gonna be a little bit too similar to Kingdom of the Wicked, because in that trilogy she's also a witch. I think it'll be fine because this is not anything like Wrath or the Princes of Hell. The back of it says, a witch and a witch hunter thrust into holy matrimony. There was only one way such a story could end, a stake in a match. So this is a trilogy. I actually just went to Barnes and bought the other 2 books. I have high hopes for this. I know that I went into Anastasia with high hopes, but after reading that, I feel like this could be a really big hit. We will see. I'm just excited to get into a new story, new world, new characters, because I just need something different. Wish me luck. Let's start this. Kind of scary. Anyway, update. I got to part 2, page, I think it's 111. So far so good. It's nothing, I guess a lot has happened. It's dual point of view, which I really like. Basically, she's a witch, like we knew. There's different kinds of witches. I don't know. Reading a bunch of fantasy with witches, you kind of like, they're all low-key the same. It's the same thing with like Fae in books. But yes, she's a witch. No one knows that she is, but something happened. Her and Reed, which is the guy's name, got into a little scuffle, and the only way to fix it and not ruin Reed's name as a witch hunter and her not going to jail or something, or just whatever, is marriage, which is crazy. It's very YA written, which I really like, because getting into it didn't take too much brain power. Like, I caught on really quick, and like reading it's not confusing, which I really like. Getting into a fantasy is always just so hard. It's very fast paced, and I feel like part 2 is gonna get interesting because now the marriage thing is gonna pick up, and I'm actually very excited to continue now. The beginning wasn't boring. Like I said, it was fast paced and things were happening. It just wasn't not interesting to me, but we've gotten to the part that I was waiting for, so I'm hoping it gets more interesting now. I will update you guys and let you know how it goes. Pretty far. I'm now on part 3, which is page 366. I've read quite a bit from the last time I've talked, but I didn't really have much to update on, just because I feel like the one issue that would come up and that I was thinking of is like him, the witch hunter, finding out that Lou was a witch. Like, that was like the main problem, and I was like, that's self-explanatory. Like, I was just waiting for that to come. So I was not like bored, but like I knew what was coming. That's where my head was at. But getting to where I am now, like, things have popped up and now I'm more intrigued, and like I want to know how it ends now. Like, other than that whole thing coming up, it's gotten interesting. But it wasn't boring. It was just like, I feel like I knew it was coming. Also, Reed I didn't love at first, because like the whole witch hunter, him hating on Lou, and I love Lou, so I was just like annoyed with him, and I didn't really like him. I couldn't really see him as the love interest, but like he's softened up to me so much, and I like him a lot now. I don't know how it's gonna play out, but like right now I love the 2 of them. And also, it's been pretty easy to read and really fast paced, and it's like feeling really YA, and I don't know if I love that. I mean, I like how it was really easy to catch on to and pick up the plot points, but some points were like kind of not connecting, and I don't know if that's because it's like really YA or it's just the writing. I don't know. I'm gonna finish though, and I will let you guys know how it goes. I'm very excited now to see how it plays out. I will be back. Hi guys, finally finished Serpent and Dove. I actually finished it a few days ago, but I have not talked about it yet. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I was pleasantly surprised with the second half of the book, because I remember saying that not a lot of things were connecting in the beginning, and it felt kind of like things were happening and they weren't really making sense, and I blamed it on like the YA fact, and just like the fact that like we don't need that many explanations about things. Like, we're not going to go into depth about why things are happening, but this is what it is. Then I kept reading after I said that, and things were clicking, things were getting explained, everything was making sense, and I don't know why I didn't just wait wait to see if it would. I just assumed that like that's how the story was going to be told. And I was really also pleasantly surprised because like I said, I knew the one major plot point was him finding out she was a witch because he had no idea the whole time. And I was like, if that's the only thing that happens in this book, I'm gonna be kind of bummed out because that's like self-explanatory. But there were so many other surprises that like legit took me by surprise. I loved it like so much. I did give it 4 out of 5 just because like the beginning, like I said, I didn't love Reed, and I know you're not supposed to like him in the beginning, but it took a while for me to see him in a better light. I don't know, and I know that's the point, but just the beginning he rubbed me the wrong way for a while that I was like, I didn't want to read about him. Even though I wanted the romance to come, I was just like, oh, yeah, it was really easy to get into and understand. It was just a flowing story and it was really fast, and I didn't have to like think too much, which is the best when reading a fantasy. Thinking too much and figuring things out, it takes forever to get into them and read them, but I loved it. So I don't think I want to read it anymore. One, it's been a week already. I actually finished that on Saturday and the last day was Sunday, but I just like the thought of starting another fantasy kind of gave me a headache. I didn't want to get into another world. I didn't want to start another series. I just honestly, Anastasia took a lot out of me this week and it put me in the biggest slump ever. So the thought of another fantasy is like a no-go. I do want to do a part 2 to this because there's so many others I want to read and I'd love to like put it in a video and like reading vlog it for you guys. But a little wrap up, Kingdom of the Feared is my favorite from this whole, it's actually been I think one of my favorites from the whole month. Obsessed. I don't know what it was. I think just the full circle moment of the last book was so good. Everything started making sense. Pieces were getting put together. Wrath did it for me. I will say that the first 2 personally could have been put into like one book. Like I think after reading this, knowing what happened in the first 2, I don't think it had to be 2 separate books, but like they were good. I highly recommend this trilogy because this book was so good. I'm literally searching for Wrath in every single fantasy man that I read from now on. I love him. And Amelia I didn't love in the first 2, but then this one I liked her. It was just like so good. And then obviously Anastasia, I binged it because I wanted to get it over with. I like didn't want to read it anymore, and doing that took so much brain power and so much focus that I just major headache after and just like a huge slump. This is like probably the main reason I don't want to read another fantasy anytime soon, or right now at least. And I gave it 2 stars, and I just think it's not a story, at least for me. And I feel like reading the back of it, how it's told to be this enemies to lovers, but then you don't get the enemies to lovers till the last 200 pages out of a 600-page book. It's just like I didn't love that because I'm like expecting things and not happening, and then I have to focus on just like the weird politic fantasies of going on the first chunk of the book. It was boring to me. I just feel like it was too long and dots weren't connecting. Nothing was really flowing. That was just a personal thing. That's all I had to say about that one. But yeah, that was my week reading fantasy. I actually had a really good time aside from Anastasia putting me in the little slump. Kingdom of the Feared and Serpent and Dove were just 2 really fun reads. And I know that fantasy is hard for me to get into, but I'm like slowly wanting to read more fantasy. I think reading like really good ones makes me want to read more because there's so many different worlds out there and they're all so different, even though some of them are, like have the same ideas of like the witches and the fae and stuff. Like I don't know, and there's like something about an enemies to lovers in a fantasy book where the stakes are so high, and it's like when you get like that true enemies in a fantasy, it is so good. If you guys have any recommendations for fantasy books where the main male character feels like Wrath, I need them right now. I have a couple written down that I've gotten recommended and I'm very excited to read them. That's all for me from this week. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me read these. I definitely, like I said, want to do a part 2. I have so many other books I want to read. I just like need a break when I'm reading fantasies. I can't read them all at once. I'm gonna go read some romance books. I will be back a part 2 eventually when I read more fantasy books. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for coming along with me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you did. Let me know any other recommendations you guys have. Let me know if you read any of these books, your opinions, and I will see you hopefully in the next one. Goodbye.